Well, good afternoon, everybody. John Tabor here. Hope you're all having a good day. Welcome to the UDS webinar, The Power of Word Tracks. Did you hear what I thought I just said? It was interesting. The genesis behind this webinar was just going through, coming out of some of the boot camps that we've been doing and been talking about word tracks and scripts and those types of things. So we thought it'd be a good topic. Just for a quick review for those that were in the camps and for those that haven't, this might give you some thought starters. One of the things that I hear quite a bit is people tell me, I really don't like using word tracks or scripts, and I understand. And I always iterate that, during the interview is more about asking the right questions, but not really necessarily about scripting. And closing really is just, having some word tracks on common scripts, but, we don't have to stick to it word for word kind of a thing. But the menu presentation is where the scripts really come into most play and where they're the most relevant to keep the menu efficient. But the reality is that, whether you're using our script or somebody else's script or more likely your script, we tend to say the same things over and over. And that's because the job that we have is pretty repetitive. So we tend to, use our own script if we're not using someone else's. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about that. So why do we teach and use word tracks? Well, the first and most important answer is that it keeps us on track and it keeps us out of those potential minefields that we can get into. It's certainly in the menu presentation when we're talking about it. The words we've chosen and the words that are in there direct the process, keep it efficient, keep us from getting into sales and things like that, and saying something that might get us going a direction we don't want to go. They help us propose ideas and concepts consistently. Certainly we're looking for consistency of process, and that's important. And I just want to say that Paul Schultz just joined me. So hello, Paul.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome aboard.
He's kind of standing. I wish he had said he's kind of intimidating me, but I think he's doing it because he can be closer to the phone so he can hear him. Everybody can hear him. Also, you want to steer the conversation, ideation in a desired direction. We want to stay on point, kind of stay on our topic. It's certainly okay to be conversational with our customers and get off pace, but there's always seems to be somebody waiting to get in, so we want to kind of stay on point. The words we've used have been refined to limit us from getting into subject matter we don't want to talk about. I know that we spent some time on our menu that we teach in our 5-day and in our boot camps that, it is efficient. It goes from product to product. It transitions in a very smooth, easy manner. It's really designed not to give too much information, but more just enough. And then we can get into the details and a lot of information when we're talking to the customer in the closing phase. I've got, I can see some of you are off the slides. That's okay. There is a couple of slides though I'd like you to see because I think they're funny. So if you get a chance, jump back on. They create an emotional response. One of the things that in F&I that we want to do whenever possible is get that emotion going based on our product. When we have people buy based on emotion and we close on logic, but it's an emotional connection or emotion trigger that gets people interested in the products we sell. We want to create a pictures in somebody's mind. When we talk about, gosh darn it, you get up in the morning, you got to get your kids ready for school. You're rushing, you're a little behind. You got everything together. You get them in the car. You go to start it, and won't start. Or you look and you got a flat tire. And they see that, and then we tack that on with a little motion, and we say things like, "Gosh, how would you feel in that situation?" Or "Have you ever been in that situation?" And it definitely brings that picture and emotion to mind. It invites predictable responses. When we ask somebody, and give them a choice, it gives that we know which way they're going to go. Would you prefer option A or prefer option B? That we give them the choices and they give us a predictable response. We all know that we're going to hear no quite a bit, so we should be ready for it. It controls the message, certainly. Keeps us compliant, and that's important. And it's interesting that when used as designed, word tracks are good. The only problem is every once in a while they go bad. So let's talk about what I want to do today is talk a little bit about how some of these go bad and what we can do about them. So what happens when word tracks break down or scripts break down and lose effectiveness? Familiarity is probably the biggest. We lose a little enthusiasm in what we're saying. We may drop a little bit of energy. We're so familiar with what we're saying to the customers that it sounds like we've said it a bunch of times instead of we're having a conversation one-on-one with the customer. They over time erode away from what we learned. We see this all the time that we get away from the script. We start using salesy words. Sometimes we'll get into things where we're talking, with this you get, or one of the things that I hear a lot is it covers and you'll be covered, and that's never taught in a script. Well, I think in our script it's only used a couple of times, but customer doesn't really understand that, and we kind of get away from the original form. We've talked about this, that you start reciting instead of having a conversation. We know it so well that we could do it in our sleep, and we just speed through it, and we don't have a conversation. It's reciting, and it has that tone to it. Almost sounds like we're not interested, and then that instills that non-interest in the customer as well. Oops, sorry about that. We shortcut the process. That's a big one. We'll start to not only get away from our script, but we start shortcutting the process. We maybe don't interview everybody all the time, or we don't use a 4-column script, or we'll, just start kind of making it quick, shortcut the process. We got people waiting. I can't do it the right way. I've got to kind of do it a different way.
That never happens, does it?
It does happen occasionally. So that happens. The pace is too fast or too slow. Probably fast is more common than slow, but one of the things that I was reading that was interesting is Microsoft just did a study, and they determined that adults have an initial attention span of 9 seconds, and that number's dropping. And they have a selective or sustained attention span of 10 minutes. So even if they're interested in a topic, chances are they start falling off of it in 10 minutes. So, we can't speak too slow because we'll lose them, and we can't speak too fast because we'll lose them, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Number one, this is by far the number one reason word tracks or scripts lose their effectiveness is we just speak too fast. It's something that we know, and we just power through it. A menu presentation from beginning to before I ask you to choose an option, do you have any questions? Or, excuse me, do you have any questions before I ask you to choose an option? Should be about 4 to 5 minutes tops. And most of them that I work with are in that 4.5 to 5 range. But some are a lot less because they just go way too fast. And the problem is when we're speaking that fast, the customer, when they can't see breaks or hear breaks in between words, they start to lose interest quickly, and they just give up trying to keep up. So it's important, even if you are a fast talker, to make sure that you break up your words. And we were using some things in class recently that help. If you're a fast talker, there's a teleprompter app that's free. You download that, put the script in the teleprompter app, and you can change the speed. And it's really interesting to see how that really helps people that speak fast slow down a little bit. Or slowly over time, we stop using the words designed to keep us out of trouble. Our numbers fall, and we don't know why we're off track a little bit. We see it all the time coming out of boot camps or training that, somebody will get a little bit of a boost. We'll see a $100 or $200 jump in their PVR, and it's because they've gotten back on track. They've gotten back to the fundamentals. They're starting to use those words again that they used, and all of a sudden they see a lift. And it's usually because of the energy they're bringing to it. They're staying on track. Their pace is right. They're interested and engaged. So here's some ideas to get us back on track when we're using word tracks. First, keep it simple. Trust the process and trust the words that are in the script or the word track. And again, I'm mostly talking about in the menu. Certainly in our close, we have word tracks and scripts that we use, but I think it's most important in the menu. Do you agree, Paul?
I totally agree, because of the fact that as people deviate from the menu structure, their presentation has a tendency to get longer and more salesy. And as a result, everybody's looking to shorten the time for delivery. So if you stick to your process, that's going to give you the maximum opportunity to keep the delivery time as short as possible, because there's nothing better than getting through the left side, first column, and having the customer say, yeah, that's what I want. You're done. If you hadn't done it that way, you might have missed that opportunity to do a left side and gotten way too deep into the sales aspect of it and taken a lot more time.
Good point. Less is more. Certainly in the menu presentation, we want to make that as efficient as possible. We want to invite responses, when we get into our closing, where we can explain it a little bit more. Some of those that I can see on the screen that are listening today and participating are really, really good at making a script conversational. They stay right on it. Their deviations are really more about the customer and conversation, or responding to what the customer's either doing and things like that. And they do a really good job of making it sound like it's not a script, or it's not a word track, and more of a conversation. And that's a huge advantage. From a customer's perspective, it builds credibility and trust, and they're more likely to listen to what you have to say, especially when you get to say something like, may I recommend something? Or can I share something with you? They're more likely to want to do that. Efficiency, again, is the goal. So I've stopped listening, so why are you still talking? We've all had that customer. And, again, remember that Microsoft study, 9-second attention span. And if we're not in the sync with the customer, we're going too fast, we're going too slow, they lose interest, and they shut down. And we've all seen that, and they're waiting for us to finish so that they can say thank you, but no. And I don't know, I just thought this picture really kind of brought to life that kind of customer and the attitude that they have.
Yeah, Keith, I thought I saw that customer in your office the other day when I was there.
So how can we be more effective in communicating? First, we got to watch and listen, and then we learn. And I'm sure some of you have heard this, but listen with your eyes. When we communicate, the way we communicate is interesting. We're talking about word tracks, but really the way we communicate is 55% is body language, 38% is voice tone and inflection, and only 7% is the words we use. So even though the words are important, how we say them is even more important. How we react to the customer's body language. We can tell when they didn't understand something, or we can tell when they want to ask a question even though they're not articulating that to us because of the body language. So by watching and listening, we can do a lot better. And when it comes to listening, it's an interesting fact. Most people listen with the intent. Most people don't listen with the intent to understand. In F&I, we tend to listen with the intent to respond. And you hear it a lot in a closing situation. Customer will say, you know what, I think I'll just go with that payment that I was quoted. And we go, I understand. We don't even hesitate. It's like right into our rebuttal, and we just don't even give them a second. And we're not really listening to understand, and we're not having those words like, I understand. I think people have felt that way. So what I'm hearing is, or what I think you're telling me is this, and then we can use those terms like, is it price, or the way I've got them grouped. But we go right into that, and sometimes it's just too quick. So, we've got to, or we're thinking about what we're going to say before the customer finishes talking, and we miss something. See that a lot in the interview. Customer will mention something in an interview, and then the F&I person never brings it up again. Where they had a product, maybe two products. Then when we offer the menu or offer the option, they say no, and the F&I person never brings up the fact that they had the products before and why aren't they choosing them this time. Happens a lot, and that usually is because of self-listening. We're focused on what we're going to say next versus what the customer is saying. So if you take nothing away from this webinar, this is the one to take away from it. As F&I people, if we listen with the intent to understand and stop listening with the intent to respond, watch what happens. We start identifying needs. When we start selling based on need, good things happen from the customer. They see a lot more value in the product. They see value in us. Cancellations go way down. Everything gets better. Power of the pause. We were just kind of talking about that. Taking a second to respond, pausing before we respond or rebut what a customer just said really builds a lot of credibility. There was a study that was done that talked about people who naturally do this are perceived to be more intelligent than those who immediately respond to a challenge or a question or anything like that. So the power of the pause is important. Think about it. When you're working with your customers and they object, are you right on it? I mean, do you pounce or do you stop and think about what they said, let them see you thinking about it, and then respond? And then what do you do with your hands? We're just talked about it. Body language, voice tone, and inflection are really, really important. Leaning in, having some energy, sitting up straight, focusing on the customer, using eye contact. This is another thing that we do in F&I just because of our job. We're preparing documents, we're doing things, and we're talking to the customer, but we're not looking them in the eye when they're talking to us. We're looking at something else. Or when we're presenting a menu, I see a lot of people that are looking at the menu instead of looking at the customer. And it's much better to look at the customer because you're going to pick up on the visual cues because we're all great at body language. But if we're looking down, we're not going to see that. When the customer is talking to us and we're not making eye contact, their perception is we're not really interested in them. And we're just going through the process and we become a salesperson versus a consultant. So what can we do? Here are some things that you can do. One, use video. We talk about all the time to evaluate your delivery of the word tracks that you're using and all the other things that you communicate when you're with a customer, your body language, your voice tone inflection. You're going to hear your default word. And it might be something that you want to work on, the awesomes and the goods, greats, all those things that we say over and over when we're role playing. In a review, kind of what we talked about today. When in doubt, slow down. Don't recite. Try to be conversational. Number one thing I recommend to just about every F&I person that I work with when they're delivering the menu is to get them to slow down. They just go too fast because they're used to doing it. Keep it simple. Stay on point. Again, when coaching with F&I people, it's usually of taking things out of their presentation versus putting things in. I'm always about keeping it simple and efficient, and I'm saying, hey, let's take that out, save that for later. Let's work on that in the close, and keep it easy. Listen to understand and not to reply. Again, that's a big one. We want to pause before we respond, and the power of the pause is important. Be aware of our body language, voice tone, inflection, and eye contact. And I tell this a lot, and it could be just because I always have a camera in somebody's face, but don't forget to smile. It lightens people up and relaxes them, and sometimes we forget to do that, but I'm always, like I say, I always have a camera on somebody, so that's probably why they're not smiling, but just something you want to think about. Paul, you have anything?
I think you really hit some high points. One of them is listen, because if we're structuring our menu properly, we've listened to the customer at the introduction or interview portion, and so as a result, then we can structure the menu properly. And if you're using a goalpost menu effectively, it's going to give you the opportunity to say, based on the information you shared with me a few minutes ago, and if the customer understands that you really did listen and you are structuring it because of the fact you listened based on the information they did share with you, you have a lot more credibility, as opposed to, especially where John mentioned, the guy says, I'm going to keep my car for only 5 years, but I'm going to put 150,000 miles on it. If you show them a 10-year, 100,000-mile service contract, you weren't listening. So you can get the customer buy-in a lot more effectively just by letting them lead you in the direction that they want to be sold. So it's important that we keep that in mind. And I really encourage you, especially you people who have 2, 3, 4 people in the department, do presentations to each other. Do presentations to each other, because you know what you're expecting, but don't do it in an overcritical way. Do it so you can each learn, and it really helps you a lot. Get much better at what you do, and it'll help you slow down. Talk to them, slow me down, speed me up, whatever you need to do. And I got to think that if you generate that relationship in the department, you all have a lot to gain from it.
Good points, Paul. Thanks.
I'll get shorter next time.
Does anybody have any questions?